There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn Breathes Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Saturday Reads. Yes, I didn't get myself organized, or that's not really accurate, but I didn't get a Friday Reads video yesterday. First time this year, I think. I mean, I have missed a week once or twice, but I haven't done a Saturday Reads in a long time. Well, I just was exhausted yesterday, and I needed to just kind of sleep the day away until I got busy and had another Biblioadventure, TM the Book Cougars, which I'm going to tell you about. I have lots to tell you about, and I'm actually glad I waited till today because I've got more to tell you about. Because I only finished one book, and I don't want to tell you too much about that because there's a special video coming on my channel fairly soon about it. So I thought, what am I going to talk about? I've got a great mystery guest, but do I have much to talk about myself? Well, because I waited an extra 24 hours, I have a whole bunch. So, let's see. I don't even know where to start. Well, here's my new mug. Isn't it gorgeous? Look at that. I got it last night at the bookstore, McNally Robinson. I've been admiring it for months and months, and finally had enough money in my bank account by the end of the month that I could splurge for it. It's, I think it's called T-bone china. Like, it's that extra special. It's a mug, a very made of I think it's called T-bone china. Is that what you call it? Should have asked my mom, and I don't know what the plant is, but it's beautiful. And it certainly goes with my blouse today, doesn't it? So that made me very happy. Something else that made me very happy. Let's just be a material book girl for a few more minutes. I have been thinking of doing this for some time, and I finally did it the other day. I was talking about bookmarks a few weeks ago, but one thing I didn't say about bookmarks at that time was I don't like how flimsy so many of them are, and I wanted some of the ones I have are, really special to me, and so I wanted to preserve them. So what about laminating them? So I took 3 to Staples stationery chain. I don't know if it's only Canada. I don't know. But anyway, any big stationery store would probably offer laminating services, and got 3 done just as a test, and I am delighted with them. So here's one of my book depository. So it will never wear out. And this was one I got in Japan that I don't know what that says, but it's just a nice little bookmark from Japan. And here's another book depository. So I just got these 3 laminated, so they will be with me unless I lose them. They're not gonna, get bent out of shape, literally. And that's what I hate now that I sometimes take books to outside the house. I always forget to push the bookmarks down so they don't get bent, and by the time I get to the cafe or the library, they're bent, and it's like, ah! So now that I realized, so this cost me $6, and it's $2 a full sheet, and this only took up a small part of a sheet, an 8.5 by 11 sheet, so I could have gotten a lot more for that price. And then I think it was $1 for him to cut them out of cut them out. But I am going to take all of my precious bookmarks to get laminated. So, I'm just geeking out over that. So I got a new cup. I got some lovely bookmarks preserved for the ages. Last night, I went to another book launch at McNally Robinson's up the street with my mom and with Sharon Butala. I mean, Sharon had planned to go too, so we just kind of met there and sat together, and what a fascinating evening. It was a collection of personal essays, autobiographical essays, by a writer that was not familiar to me, and in fact I thought the essays were going to be about a woman's life, but also her life as a figure skater. Like, I didn't know if she was a professional figure skater, but no, it's actually, the title is unfortunately not, it's going to turn people off of the book if you're not into figure skating, because the book is not really about figure skating. The title essay at the beginning of the book is, but even it's about so much more than that. Anyway, without further ado, the book is called Skater Girl. An Archaeology of the Self by Robin Pacific. I can't imagine that Pacific is her real surname, but maybe it is. I didn't ask her. Nobody asked her. And it's just come out, I guess, April 1st this year. And she lives in Vancouver, I think, in British Columbia, certainly. What a fascinating woman she was. I can't remember the last time I've listened to an author not just read from their work, but talk about their work and their life, where I was so rapt. I just couldn't take my eyes off her words, if I can put it that way. She just was incredibly fascinating. And this is these essays are about her life. And she's led an absolutely fascinating life, lots of trauma in her childhood, and lots of wayward detours through her young adulthood, and my goodness. And she has ended up as a Marxist, feminist, Anglican lay clergy person in Vancouver. And all of those dipsy doodles, I think she's got kind of one essay about each of those outward journeys through spirituality, through politics, through being kind of a rebel on the streets almost. That's probably all I'm going to say. I'll leave it at that. Mum bought the book. I always get Mum's books eventually because she doesn't keep her books, but I'm certainly looking forward to reading it when she has done with it. And Sharon got a copy, so you might hear Sharon talking about that book. We just had a really stimulating night. Robin Pacific, I think it's her only book. Let's see, has she written anything else? I don't think she said. She's also a visual artist, so there's lots about art. And she's about maybe 65, 70. Fascinating woman. Oh my God. Okay, I'm now on her webpage, which will be linked in the show notes. I think this is her only book. It's a memoir and essays. Oh, she's got a writing website as well. So I'll put them both in. She read her title essay, and she said, many of you may not like me very much by the time I've read the whole essay to you. And it was an essay that was as much, if not more, about being a bully as a kid while figure skating as anything else. And it would just set the tone for an incredibly candid, honest night of storytelling and deep thinking about what makes a life and what makes a person. And I think you might all want to check this book out for yourself. So that was incredible. And then as if that wasn't enough, I was so stimulated. I got home and thank God I slept away the day, because I needed a lot of energy to keep myself open and vulnerable. That was another word that Robin Pacific used as kind of the core identity that she's kind of landed, that she's arrived at from all of these other identities throughout her life. To stay open and vulnerable. So I was in the perfect headspace, but I was already stimulated up to my collarbone. And I turned on Lindy's video from last night, Lindy of Lindy's Magpie Reads. And I want to sing its praises to the rooftop. It's one of the best videos I've ever seen on her channel. It's one of the best videos I've ever seen. She always does this kind of thing so well. She goes to a writer's festival and she does a report on everything she saw and experienced and felt that day. And she just is incredible when she's in that mode. So I just fell into her video reporting on day one of the Vancouver Writers Festival. And she talked about some of the candlelit controversies, the Giller debacle and the Alice Munro debacle that affected the programming of the festival, and then the event that was eventually replaced those two that were crossed off the list because how embarrassing Canada can be, was an event about finding joy amid turmoil, and the incredible array of writers that read and talked, and the way Lindy described it. I mean, it's so vicariously intense listening to her report of that day. There was so much more she talked about, so many writers, so many new books that were new to me, some books that I had already knew about and that she got all this perspective on. And we really need to, if Lindy's too modest to start up her own Patreon, I think we need to start one and force her to travel around and go to these conferences and report back, because she is just incredible. doing it. So I can't recommend that video, and I think there's going to be another one coming today and tomorrow. That's what I know she's done when she's gone to these festivals in the past. So do check that out. And I guess I might as well use that as a segue to Patreon. I haven't talked about Patreon. I haven't really gotten new patrons very much this year, so I've kind of stopped talking about it, and I don't know if I should stop talking about it. I'm always looking for more support. Maybe I need to make a fresh video explaining what the financial support coming to me from Patreon actually means to me and kind of what my situation is. So I'll think about making that. So I won't say any more about that part of it right now, but I'm always welcome. I'm always looking for, welcoming more support of what I'm doing here. But I do have to tell you, and you can skip over this if you have no intention or interest in patronizing me. Skip ahead. Everything's marked in the show notes, right, by timestamps. Unfortunately, Patreon is getting complicated as of, I think, November 1st. It might not even be till the end of November, but it's in November sometime, where if you take out a new Patreon membership, not just on my channel, this is so you might want to listen to it because you patronize other people. If you take out a new membership on the Patreon app, which is on iOS on the Apple platform, there's going to be I think it's a 30% surcharge that's going to be added. And that's what Apple does across the board. And they have somehow allowed Patreon to be exempt from that for several years. But now they're enforcing, if you take out your membership on the Patreon app on iOS, I should have the number. What's the number? What's the percentage? I'll put a link to all this stuff in the show notes. 30%. 30% surcharge or service fee on top of what the membership is. So most Patreon creators, and I have to say that I've done the same, we would lose that 30%. So it's we have in order not to, I've added it to the price of a membership. However, this is the part you need to listen to carefully. This stupid 30% thing only applies to new memberships, not renewals. New memberships taken out on the Patreon app. So it does not apply to new memberships taken out on the Patreon webpage, loaded up on your browser or on Android. This is only the iOS app, the Apple app. Okay, so that's enough about that, but I'm just warning people, and I'll have to make this a warning announcement semi-regularly for the next while. But like I say, I haven't gotten any new patrons for a long time, so I don't want to waste my breath on this, but I do feel obligated to let you know. So if you take out your Patreon membership any other way except the iOS app, you don't get hit with that 30% extra. Talk about annoying. Anyhow, okay, there. Now, let's meet this week's fabulous mystery guest, shall we? And this week's mystery guest is a writer I had the privilege of seeing launch her most recent novel. This is Marlis Wesseler, a writer in Saskatchewan, in Regina, the other city that my city and her city have usually a pretty contentious rivalry. So I hope we get along during this chat, Marlis. Marlis is the author of, most recently, The Beech Forest, which was published in June, and I went to the book launch and got a copy signed. Marlis, welcome to my channel.
Thank you, Shawn.
It's so nice to meet you this way. Do you think that we're going to be okay with the whole Regina Saskatoon thing during this chat?
I'm sure. And I've
That's
never
great.
felt that there's much of a rivalry.
Well, it's yeah. I think it's a guy. I think it's a straight male thing, actually.
Me,
So
me.
maybe that's what it is. And it seems to be in every state or province. There's always a rivalry between the two big
Well,
cities.
yes, and Edmonton, Calgary, probably the same
That's
kind
right.
of
But
thing.
anyway, we'll lay down our swords and we're going to chat.
Yes.
First of all, about The Beech Forest, which you read from, and the writing is gorgeous and the story sounds fascinating. Tell us what this book is all about, Marlis.
The Beech Forest, the title translates into German as the Buchenwald.
Yeah.
And the book, although it has its lighter moments, concentrates on some of the ramifications of the Holocaust and what it's like being married to a German and part German herself, my main character. Well, what the ramifications are for the Germans as well as for the Jewish people. And my character is Lisa Brown, and her husband is Gerhard. And he's from Germany. They met when she was traveling as a young person. It's set in around 2006 because she eventually meets a Holocaust survivor, and any of them, if I had set it in the present day, they're all 100. I mean, they're too old or deceased. So it's set in about 2006 and 7 when computers were common and the internet was up and running so she could do her research. But it starts out with her and her husband visiting his relatives in Germany. The section I read was when she makes a trip to Berlin on her own to see a piece of art that she's always been taken with at the Modern Art Gallery. They return home and she finds herself alone after her best friend moves away and her husband gets a contract away from home as well. And she eventually does some volunteer work at the local seniors center. They live on an acreage near a small town in Saskatchewan. And she does some volunteering and becomes friends with Ben Meisner, this Holocaust survivor of Buchenwald. She becomes rather obsessed after a while with the Holocaust and doing research, which spirals her down into a certain amount of depression. And he has a secret from his life that he's been living with that he finally tells her about. And this initiates some real tragic consequences.
And we're not going to say very much more about the plot because we don't want to give anything away. But I think it's important to mention, tell me if you agree, that her husband's people come from that Buchenwald area of Germany, right?
Not really.
Oh,
They're
sorry.
they're near a beech forest, which the name,
Which,
the words beech, like a beech forest is referred to in German as der Buchenwald. So it's
okay, and
the same
yes,
title. The novel opens with her visiting with her in-laws, but then she goes for a walk in the beech forest. And
that's the
that's
connection.
just it's rather sort of a wordplay comparison rather than any actual relationship with that they have to Buchenwald itself.
Yeah, I botched the question, but thank you for clarifying that. And the other thing that I think we should just gesture towards is that there are secrets, or no, let me put it a different way. What it says on the back in the synopsis is that her husband Gerhardt's family still in Germany. They're reticent about anything to
Yeah,
do with their family
but
history, and that's
there's not a specific secret that they harbor, but that is very common in Germany. The Holocaust isn't much discussed, especially by the older generation.
right.
There's the guilt and shame involved, I think, would be overwhelming if it's continually thought about. They put it in the past.
And what was the genesis of this story idea for you, Marlis?
My whole adult life, I've been married to a German from Berlin,
Okay, well, that's
who we met when I was traveling as a young person. So of course the couple is based somewhat on myself and my husband, my late husband, but the story itself is entirely fiction. Ben Meisner, the Jewish elderly gardener who she gets to know, is entirely made up. I have never gotten to know any Holocaust survivors, but I have done a lot of reading over the years, as
Nice.
one would, married to a German, and as with Lisa, I'm part German myself, Canadian German. My ancestors moved here in the early 1900s, so.
As we're talking, I'm thinking about Sharon Butala's most recent novel, Leaving Wisdom. Have you read that?
No, I haven't yet.
Do you
I
know that
will.
there's a similar storyline? Part of the story is that she moves from Calgary back to the hometown where she was born, where she left as a teenager because of
Yes.
scandal. And she moves back, maybe, and it was age 70 or whatever. And she befriends a Holocaust survivor who lives in the town. And
Oh,
that's
for
a
heaven's
pretty
sake,
important part of the
I
story.
didn't.
So,
Well, I will certainly read that. That
yeah. So
it's
the two novels could be read side by side in an interesting way. I'm sure looking
well,
forward to reading
certainly.
yours. I'm curious about the humor. The passage you read at the launch was really, parts of it were just really funny. You got a lot of laugh out loud moments. People in the crowd were laughing at her
Yes,
making her way through Berlin. So, what was it like threading humor through a very serious story? Did that just come naturally to you, or was it something you had to, I don't know, work at?
I think humor is embedded in all my writing. Humor doesn't lighten things, it heightens. And
Very
so
interesting.
humor really adds a lot to any kind of novel. And tragedy, even while you're living through it, has its humorous moments, as does my novel throughout. I think even during the most tragic moment, there's quite a bit of humor in that particular chapter.
You have written several novels, and what other kinds of writing have you done?
My first two books were collections of short stories. My first short collection was called Life Skills, and the second one was called Imitating Art. Well, Imitating Art is one of the stories where her dad is named, the main character's father is named Art, and so
Well,
it's
that's
Imitating Art has a lot of puns and plays on words. Yes, there's humor in that collection. And then the third book is a novel called Elvis Unplugged. It's about a man who, well, the idea was he could be Elvis, taken off life support and in a hospital. And my main character thinks maybe this is Elvis. This was written in the 90s, the early 90s, when there wasn't, not that things have improved, but there wasn't enough hospital space for people who were just in comas or and so some of them were. I just read at the time about a family who were complaining because their loved one was moved from one hospital to another whenever there was room. And so that's what happens to my character. And my main character, decides to follow him from one place in Saskatchewan to another.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. My mom's a big Elvis fan.
I have a neighbor who has an Elvis museum.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I've been there so many times. Just, it's such fun.
Is it open to the public?
It used to be, but she's retired and they've moved to a smaller location. But still, she loves to show it off.
And what are you working on now, Marlis?
Well, right now I'm working. It's not a crime novel. I can't call it a crime novel, but it's about a woman in her 50s again who commits a crime, sort of unintentional murder.
Okay.
I
I
suppose.
hate when that happens. And I'm not going to ask you if this is autobiographical.
Oh no.
Eh,
Yes, this is definitely not. Yeah, I'm having fun with this novel. I'm not going to, well, who knows what it will turn out like in the end.
I noticed that you took great care to say that it's not a crime novel. Can you say more about that? Why isn't it a crime novel, or what kind of novel are you writing? Would you call
Well,
it literary
because it
fiction? Or,
it's not a it's not a whodunit. We know who did it right away, or as soon as the crime is committed. We get hopefully involved with the character first, who's rather amoral anyway, a little bit. I'm just not sure about her yet. And I'm still creating her. So
I hope you continue to have fun with it, and I look forward to it making its way into the world.
yes, I hope I can find a publisher. It's getting harder and harder, I think, especially now that Cotto Books here is gone. And I was very lucky and glad that Thistledown took the Beech Forest
And that was
and
the same experience Sharon Butala
and I
had with.
had
Mm.
they provided me with such a good editor, Michael Kenyon from BC. I still appreciate everything they've done for this book. So
And I'd like to hear what kind of reading you like to do. I think you have a couple books to recommend.
yes, okay. I have one of my favorite writers has been Richard Ford, who
Okay.
I have read all of his work, but my favorite book, actually, not this one, one of the previous books, Independence Day. I
Yes.
think it's just wonderful. And this book is a good follow up to that because it's the same character and
Yeah.
his son going on a journey. And Independence Day was about the Frank Bascombe character going on a journey as well with his then 15-year-old son. And this book is about him as a senior citizen going on a trip with his now middle aged son, who is also ill with Lou Gehrig's disease. A really interesting read and a good follow up to Independence Day. But I still think Independence Day is his greatest book.
I know that you must be familiar with the Saskatoon writer David Carpenter. Do you
Oh,
know him?
yes, for sure. Yes, I do. Yes.
Yeah. I'm doing a series of kind of legacy interviews with him for my channel. So
Oh,
I
yes.
just was at his house the day before yesterday for another one, doing one interview per book. And
Oh,
so are you familiar with his essay about going hunting with Carver and
yes.
Ford?
Oh, I certainly am. Yes.
It's one of my favorite things he's written, and it's
Yes.
available on his website for free for anybody. So I'll put a link both to that essay and the full book is his selected essays called Writing Home. But yeah,
Oh,
it's a
great.
wonderful piece of
Yes.
writing.
Yes. I remember that from when it first came out, and I think I've reread it since. So, I mean, that particular piece where he goes hunting
Particular.
with Richard Ford.
Yes. Great
And
story.
the second writer I've recently become interested in, and only from I was looking for something to read on Libby through the public library. And this writer is named Francesca Marciano. She's
Mm.
based in Rome. She's Italian, but she writes in English. And the book that I downloaded is called The Other Language. The reason I wanted to mention her was that her characters are so involving. It's a collection of short stories. Usually, when I go, if I have a doctor's appointment or something, and I know I'm going to have to wait, I take my phone with a book on it. Usually, I can't sit there and be totally involved in the book while I'm waiting in a waiting room. But I was so invested in these characters, I forgot I was where I was. I was just deeply involved in her characters, and that's what I find with Richard Ford as well. This able to become wrapped up, well, wrapped actually, wrapped and wrapped up in the characters and in the worlds that they create. The way they describe and It's not, you don't see it as a description. You're right in there right away, in with them, in their world. A lot like one of my favorite 20th century books is Light in August, Faulkner's Light in
Oh, yes.
August.
Right.
And he does this, but I mean, I can't compare these to him, but he has such a way of entirely involving you in his characters and in his world.
Very immersive.
Yes.
I've never heard of Francesca Marciano.
I haven't read any of her other books,
Yeah,
but
I see she has a few more,
yes,
and she has lived in New York and Kenya for many years. So that's probably
yes,
why she writes in English, but she is based in Italy, apparently. Well,
yes,
what
yes.
an interesting recommendation. I have one last question for you. It's kind of a two-part question. Do you gravitate as a writer? Do you gravitate more to short stories or novels? And the same question as a reader. Do you gravitate more to short fiction or novels?
Well, as a writer, I've gravitated since I wrote Elvis Unplugged. I don't see things in short stories anymore. I see projects as novels. I've written hardly any, if any, short stories since my second collection, Imitating Art, was published. So yes, I've become a novelist.
And how about
But my novels are short. Most of my novels are the Elvis Unplugged was short. Then South of the Border was my fourth book. It was a novel about two young people traveling in Mexico. It's longer. But then the fifth novel, The Last Chance Ladies Book Club, was a short novel as well.
and this one is 200 pages, right on the nose, so that's
Yes,
definitely a short
not
novel.
too long.
And what about as a reader?
It depends on. I can't say I'm attracted to either one over the other. I just
Okay.
it depends on what I feel like reading at the time. For library downloads, I usually try to find short stories because I read more sporadically. I take the phone to bed to read and become tired enough. And if I have a short story, I can finish it at the time.
I think I love both forms equally, but I do
Yes.
read more novels than short stories. But I'm not the kind of reader, and I know many readers who they don't really like short stories because the story always leaves them wanting more.
Oh, really?
And I don't have that.
Well,
I don't have that reaction
no,
myself to
I've
short
never
stories.
had that. Well, not very often had that reaction. But as a writer, I find the hardest parts of producing anything is the beginning and the ending. And in a short story, if you're writing for a collection of short stories, you have to do all these beginnings and all these endings. And a
I've heard
novel,
that from
you can
writers.
write,
Yes,
you can
you only have to do it
write
once.
many pages between the beginning and the ending.
Well, I'm sorry that this chat has an ending because I could talk with you for a couple more hours, actually. I'm looking forward to reading The Beech Forest and
Yes,
having you back to chat about it in more detail later on. Thank you so much for this chat, Marlis.
well, thank you, Shawn. It's been a pleasure.
So I'm very much looking forward to reading Marlis's The Beech Forest, and some of her other books sound really interesting too. Elvis Unplugged. I think I would have to get find a used copy. It's out of print, but a used copy of that for my mom for Christmas. Don't tell her. Oh dear, she always watches at least the mystery guest part of the video. So, Mom, tell me if that would be an interesting Christmas gift for you. All right, well, I have gone on because I don't have much else to say. And in terms of what I've done on BookTube this week, I think where I get bogged down and it actually made me tired was I tried to get 2 long videos edited and posted, and I realized that just wears me out, and I couldn't get the second one finished in time, so it'll be coming soon, but it wasn't this week. But the one that I did get edited, because it really wasn't that long, because it was only the second half that I had to look at, was the full-length chat with Adam that I think we recorded it in July and it went up on my channel in August as a mystery guest, the first half. So if you want to see the full meal deal, which is the second half added on to the end, that's the video I put up earlier this week, and lots about Japanese lit, but not exclusively that. So do check that out. Yeah, so that's what I've done. The only book I finished was just the day after. It was last weekend. I had a chat with my patron on Patreon and her long-term subscriber, Melanie, of Anne Michael's novel that's on the Booker shortlist, Held. And we had a great talk about it, and I'm going to rush it. I'm going to move it closer to the front of the line so I can get our chat posted before the Booker winner is announced. So by the end of this month. So that means basically in the next week, doesn't it? Or maybe very early November. It was a really good chat. So I have to say that this went off the rails for me, but in a way that I was completely engaged, however dissatisfied I was with the final 2/3 of the novel. It still held my interest. It's a gorgeous piece of writing, and I don't want to say too much because I want you to watch the longer chat, because Melanie and I had a very deep dive kind of chat about it. But Anne Michaels is not a novelist. I read this shortly after it came out, her first novel, Fugitive Pieces, and I've heard the same complaint about it recently, but I felt this hung together as a novel far more than this one did. So I think of the pun I made. I'm going to make it again too. Trot it out wherever I can, my puns, that Hell didn't really hold together. She's a poet and a philosopher, and she tried to write a novel and it didn't work. But oh my God, the poetry of the sentences. And I hate philosophy. It's the stupidest discourse in the world, and that political philosophy I might make an exception for. I see the importance of that. But philosophy, thinking deeply about thinking, is the stupidest activity you could ever do. However, if you're actually thinking deeply about a topic, is that philosophy? Maybe. But most philosophy that I've ever heard of, it's thinking deeply about thinking. Just get out of here with that nonsense. But anyway, there are deep ruminations on things in here that have a standalone vitality that took my breath away. So it's probably a book I will return to again and again, but it is a pretty awful novel. Stay tuned for more thoughts and even some intelligent thoughts from Melanie on that. That's the only book I finished, but I did want to talk about Jean Rhys. I have picked back up with reading this to another deeply loyal, wonderful subscriber and patron, Alina. I had put it down because of all the personal stuff going on and the fact that my cough was so bad I couldn't read aloud, really. But we've gotten back into it, and this morning I finished reading a story to her that just knocked my socks off. Maybe you know it. I had never heard of it. It is just an incredible short story by Jean Rhys. Did I say what this is? It's Jean Rhys's The Collected Short Stories. And I just finished this morning reading a story at about the 60% mark in this book that was originally published in 1960, or maybe 66. I've seen two publication dates, and the little bit of research I did on it this morning. I Spy a Stranger. And now I have found that there is a somewhat new YouTube channel. It's not a booktube channel, but it's a YouTube channel by an audio narrator in the UK. He has a British accent. I don't know where he lives. He's a professional audio narrator. It's not a pay site, and he reads kind of canonical literary short stories from the 20th century and then does a commentary on them at the end of the video / audio. It's all in audio, but it's on YouTube. I'll put a link to him and that channel to this story. So that would be one way that you could experience the story. And oh my God, so it's about two sisters having kind of a gossipy chat about their cousin. I think it's a distant cousin, and she's European, or at least lived in Europe, and it's during World War II, and she's a refugee from Europe. And she didn't have anywhere to go, so she stayed with the one sister. They're both sisters are married. And this cousin is odd. And she's so odd, or considered to be so odd that she's kind of run out of town. That she'd been staying with the one sister, and her husband hated this Laura, this cousin, and it's all still in the Blitz, blackouts, curtains, and all that stuff. And the point of view is so fascinating because she's not really in the story except for some of her diary or journal entries. But these two sisters, in quite a gossipy, often unkind way, talking about her. And it's just quintessentially Jean Rhys in that was who she was, really. The social outcast. And structurally and thematically, it's one of the most fascinating stories in the book. And there's been plenty of fascinating stories. So I'll leave it at that. If you've read the story, I'd love to hear your comments. If you go listen to the story in that YouTube audio version that I mentioned, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And Alina I'm looking forward to her thoughts too. And that channel, I've subscribed to it. I don't really have a lot of time and space in my life to listen to short stories, but because I do my own audio booking, a complete collection that I can mark on Goodreads that I've read it, but I think I'm going to make an exception for this channel. So I wanted to make sure to tell you about that. I'm not going to start anything. I don't know that I'm going to start very much more. Well, I have a few more kind of buddy read or Zoom chat commitments, but not very many more for the rest of the year. But beyond that, my goal, I haven't done this for a few years, but this year I think it's important for me to finish the books I have in progress and not start at least not very much more in order to achieve that goal. So that is my Saturday reads, and thanks ever so much for watching.